He looks cool. He seems like a cool guy. He really does. I feel like his history, it leans a bit more Palestinian. Here's two things that I want to say as I go through and I read all of these histories. Here's two things that I want to say. I want to be super ultra clear on this, okay? Probably going to watch you and Hassan going back and forth. I think that'd be interesting. See what you guys are arguing about.
Yeah. I've made a new friend. What can I say?
I say that, yeah.
I'm very appreciative of the fact that he completely ignored everyone in his chat trying to spread rumors about me. That was nice.
Yeah? Did he,
because,
wait, was that a good thing or a bad thing? I can't tell. Were you being sarcastic?
Probably because the rumors are just so insane, right? I don't know if you know, like, how wacky people have gotten about me over
I've
that
seen,
shit.
I think Bad Empanada's been behind a few of those, yeah. I saw the really funny one about, I feel like for all the things that like dipshit lefties say about like Zionist imperialists and the settlers and blah, 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 like all of those arguments I think apply to people over the age of 17 in the West Bank. Somebody DGG chat earlier asked, Destiny, rewinding the last month before getting into the thick of things, I can imagine the deep dive into the history seemed daunting. Did you have a particular goal before starting? And after it all, what are the big takeaways? What was my goal before? I think my goal before starting was just to get acquainted with it before like having serious debates about it. The big takeaway that I've had from this that actually makes me really excited about learning shit in the future is one of the reasons, I think I might have said this on stream before, I'll just say this one more time. And then if any of you guys hate history, maybe it'll change your perspective as well. One of the things that I've always felt is I got into things like math or physics because they built off of each other sequentially. They made sense, right? To understand integration, you have to understand derivatives. To understand derivatives, you need to understand proofs. I don't know what, pre-calc, geometry, whatever the fuck. To understand geometry, you need algebra. To understand algebra, you need multiplication and whatever. It all builds off each other. One of the different approaches that I took when it came to learning this issue was studying something from start to finish or going sequentially makes all of these things, all of these like historical elements way more interesting to me. Before, when I'd studied history in the past, they were always like sequential events, like here's an article about this, here's like a wiki page about that, here's like one war here, and it's just kind of boring. Like, I don't, like, it's all just like a bunch of discrete shit that I don't care about. But when you start to study like a conflict, and I know, not a conflict, when you start to study like a history from like start to finish or large swaths of history, in my opinion, things are way more interesting because now you've got like a full narrative. You're starting to see the same names pop up over and over again. You're starting to understand like this war makes sense because of this war, or this geography makes sense because of this geography, or these people feel this way because of these events that are happening. Like that makes all of this infinitely more interesting and entertaining to me. So like my knowledge around World War I and World War II even is like pretty bad, but I don't know if I want to do more of this like start to finish reading because everything is so much more interesting to me this way. But I feel like starting and finishing things like World War I and World War II, and there's probably important precursor or post-cursor prologue events or whatever that would also make it more interesting. But I also think too that studying something, actually, I'm rewinding that. Studying something, actually, I don't know if I would study World War I or World War II. I think studying the conflict of a particular people is also very interesting. I don't know if studying World War I or World War II would be interesting to me, but I think that studying Germany from like the start of the Weimar Republic to the fall of Hitler, that would be interesting to me, like just through the lens of Germany from start to finish, and then seeing all the other peripheral events that get kind of like drawn in from that, or just studying the start and end of like, what was it, like Lenin with the Russian Empire all the way to the Gorbachev was the last for the Soviet Union, right, from the start to end. I think those types of start to finish would be really cool or really interesting. Rather than studying like conflicts or events in history, studying like the narrative of a group of people seems way more interesting to me. That was my big takeaway and everything. But
you mean you want to understand how we ended up hating Jews so much over a longer period of time? They got blamed for the plague for quite a while. Germans
maybe, yeah, I don't
French
know.
And a bunch of Europeans used to just kill them.
Yeah, I don't know anything about I don't know why anti-Semitism is so prevalent everywhere, but didn't you do something like this?
Because you got to blame it on the dirty people, and if it's not Jewish, it's the Romani or the Gypsies or some other type of vagrant, you know? Homeless people, disabled, ill people.
Didn't you do something like this with Ukraine off stream? A little bit, but my Ukrainian history went from like brief early 1900s, I think, to like where we are today. But it wasn't like a thorough accounting of it. I just wanted to know, like, how did Ukraine get to become part of the Soviet Union, and then from the Soviet Union to the breakup in 91 to today. But most of my Ukrainian history is like the past 30 years. I didn't do much like deep historical Ukrainian history. Although my defense of that would be studying the history of Ukraine wasn't as important because from 91 onwards, we had a big reset internationally with the borders of countries. So and I don't even think, even Putin doesn't really pretend to use pre-91 history other than when he echoes that the Ukrainian people have always been a part of us. But like, there's a few things to speak of this: Russification, the Holodomor, and the famine. It's just like not worth diving into that much. I think because modern history starts at 91 when it becomes its own country again. You can get away with just focusing on the events leading up to the Euromaidan and stuff like that and be more okay with that. But Lonerbox would be good to talk to about Palestinian refugees. Yeah, maybe I'll draw him. Actually, wait. Maybe we can bring him in now. Are you awake, babe? And then instead of just presenting the argument first to you guys, I can just present it to him, and then he can like walk me through this, so I'm not just giving like the most radical or extreme take. Because my take on Palestinian refugees is exceedingly horrible at the moment. So, for
those unfamiliar with who you are, how would you like to introduce yourself?
Let me read or listen to some of this, I guess.
Now comes the surprise. I still advocate communism. But what kind of communism? A German journalist asked me what kind of communist you are, and I gave an answer: a moderately conservative communist. By moderately conservative, I mean something very precise. You know what bothers me with some leftist liberals? They make big plans, let's do this new legislation and so on, but not with Rishi Sunak kind, but with authentic.
Is it just me, or does Bassem Youssef look like Robin Williams doing a Mrs. Doubtfire of a Palestinian person? Good one. He does look a bit like Robin Williams. He looks cool. He seems like a cool guy. He really does. I feel like his history, it leans a bit more Palestinian, but here's two things that I want to say as I go through and I read all of these histories. Here's two things that I want to say. I want to be super ultra clear on this, okay? One is something that I've told you guys several times is I'm free from the biases of having a political allegiance, okay? I don't have to worry about appealing to progressives. I don't have to worry about appealing to conservatives. I just have to worry about appealing to my audience, okay? This is something that gives me a lot of freedom to explore different positions intellectually without feeling beholden to a certain political group. However, being free from political narratives or political biases like that, those types of political biases, that doesn't make me free from all bias, okay? Don't misunderstand. It is super possible that I, as a Westerner, might feel a certain way about things because I am going to have almost a religiously fervent adherence to the tenets of like liberalism and democracy and all that shit, right? So as a Westerner, I might feel a certain type of way about things. As an American, I might feel a certain way about things. And as an English speaker, I might feel a certain type of way about things. One of the things that I noticed, and I did this a bit off stream as well, is reading the Arabic articles on a lot of these topics gives you sometimes meaningfully different interpretations of events or different sources for how people are writing about things. People that are educated, I had a guy, I think, from Saudi Arabia email me, and it was interesting because I think he had said that like he'd learned a lot of similar events, but from an Arabic perspective, they're shaded a lot differently. There are different quotes that are picked. There are different parts of history that are focused on. So yeah, always be aware of that. That when I say things like I don't have to worry about being like super politically partisan in certain ways, that doesn't mean that I'm lacking in all bias. Don't ever think that like, oh, because Destiny's like independent, that means that he is 100%, like an observer of truth and fact and logic, and he has no personal biases whatsoever. As long as you're a human being raised on the planet Earth, you're going to be biased in some way towards something, right? That's almost always going to be the case. Yeah, that was one thing. There's a second thing, but I don't remember what it was, but yeah.
They are endangered species today. Old conservatives, what even Lenin and Mao admired in them is this brutal realism, in the sense of, yes, we can do this, but you think like crazy about what will be the consequences. If we screw that other thing and so on and so on. To France, in 1947, I think, of European feudal aristocracy. This must be some primitive...
Sam Harris podcast history basically blames the conflict entirely on the religious certainty of jihadists. No, I've watched Sam Harris. I'm sorry, and I know some of you guys get irritated on this. I just don't view this as a religious conflict. Maybe in the past 20 years it's gotten more religious, but I think it is very clearly a conflict between Arabs and the incoming European Jews. I think that I feel like that is the only framing that makes sense. Framing it religiously just doesn't. If it was a religious, here's what I'll say, okay? If it was a religious conflict, Jews would have lost 70 years ago. Very, very, very easily. Jews would have been fucking annihilated. They wouldn't even have had a shot. No matter how many fucking miraculous 6-day wars or whatever, Jews would have been annihilated. If the Arab people were were united in their religiously fervent hatred and desire to abolish Jews on the continent. But it was a nationalist. It was like a nationalist conflict between the Arab states and the Jews, with all of the Arab states having their competing nationalistic interests as well. To frame it as a religious conflict, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. If it was a religious conflict, the Jews would have lost. There are so many other people around them that would have killed them because of the Muslim versus Jewish bullshit. Respond to Donut. Which one? Check Palestinian Arab refugees. Who are they? And Palestinian refugee, whose responsibility? Yoram and Tinker. Okay. Was that the one?
African dancings. When they come closer, you know what they recognize? You know what? The black freed slaves were singing La Marseillaise. And thousands of Polish soldiers said, wait a minute, are we here on the right side? And they changed sides. And so Napoleon won. But then, the result of all this trauma was this terrifying order to kill all white people. Now you can say, you see, if you give them freedom, what happens? It's more complex because...
Hold on. Why do you think Arabs were so much against a Jewish state, though? It's because in Islam, Jews are extremely frowned upon. I don't agree with that. I think they were against the state because Britain had made promises to a lot of people, but Britain had made promises that they would retain that land, but also because I don't think it was as much against European Jews or Jews. It was the Europeans that were coming in, which were largely Jewish. I think that was the fear, that they were losing that continent. And there might be some like religious stuff here, but like overwhelmingly it's because a whole bunch of European settlers were coming in to settle the land and kick out the Arabs that were native to that territory. I don't like using native. The Arabs that were already there. I think that's the huge issue. It's not that they were Jews. Like, it could have been white Christians and it would have been the same issue. It could have been people from Eastern Europe that were whatever, gypsy, I don't know, anybody. It literally could have been anybody. But it was the outsiders, it was the people coming from Europe that they largely contested coming in. Yeah.
Like a percentage scale, how much do you think like Britain fucked with things? Just curious.
I don't know, 5%? Like everybody fucked with everything. That's like the issue. Like everybody fucked with everything. So like for instance, one of the, and I'm curious what Lonerbox would say about this. One of the early things was a lot of people accused the Jews of being unethical because they purchased a whole bunch of land when they started moving in people there. Is that unethical? I don't know a good argument for why that's unethical. The Arab farmers that lived there didn't own any of the land. It was owned by other people, sometimes by the Ottoman state, lent to or sold to other people. So the only argument against it I can see is it just feels shitty to buy land and kick people off of it when they don't own it. But like, I don't think that's a strong argument. But maybe, I don't know, maybe other people will have feelings about that. Oh, actually, wait, here's a quick thing. I got into a big fight over this picture. I'm curious what the Arabs and the Israelis will do, or how you feel about this. So there's a picture that goes around a lot that apparently Jewish people feel really proud of. I don't know if this is like a piece of like Israeli propaganda that you guys tell yourselves. Somebody tried to put forth this argument that Tel Aviv was built here in sand dunes, okay? And it was an amazing feat, an amazing accomplishment by the Jewish people, that Tel Aviv was built on these sand dunes. They built the magnificent city of Tel Aviv. It was so cool, from nothing. There was nothing there, and then they built it, okay? While that is kind of true, Tel Aviv is like 5 kilometers, okay, from Jaffa, which was a massive port city, right? Tel Aviv was built on the outskirts of Jaffa from a lot of the people leaving Jaffa due to a variety of conflict, overpopulation, whatever reasons. It was basically built on the outskirts of Jaffa, Tel Aviv. So I feel like presenting this picture and saying, oh my God, the Jewish people built this, blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, kind of, but like if you turn the camera around, right? If you turn the camera around, you have a massive port city that is literally, you've got a massive port city that's literally right next to it, you know? I think this might even be early 1900s. So it feels a little bit like bragging about like building a suburb. I don't know. I don't know. I think it's kind of silly, but Destiny, can you quickly address your subreddit becoming a propaganda battleground? It's become unreadable. Yeah, I already said something about it yesterday. Stop posting like random violence against Palestinians or Arabs around the world. Stop posting random violence against Jewish people around the world. If you want to post about like mass shootings or like crazy events, that's fine. But Israel is so small that other ports would have had an almost similar effect. That is not true. But yeah, stop like trying to post more bad stories from one side to the other. That's so stupid, I think. The question becomes, was the land ownership system of Ottoman Empire and Palestine ethical? Yeah, maybe not. But then that's an issue with the Ottomans and shit, not necessarily people that bought it, right? Yeah, I don't know. Can you elaborate? Oh, the Palestinian refugee take. Okay. Fuck, I wish Lonerbox were here for this. I don't want to just present this argument in a vacuum. I really want him to fight me on this. Oh. Let's see if he wants to chat about this. Do you respond to Steven Crowder dredging up the pages from the manifesto of the Tennessee school shooter? Okay, I saw that, and they looked really bad. And it was tempting to start making a bunch of tweets about how this is lefty violence. It's starting to actually happen now, where people are doing mass shootings and they're using like cracker as an insult and all of this. However, we don't have all the pages of that notebook. It could be that person wrote a whole bunch of unhinged shit about everybody in that notebook. And if 10 more pages were released about them talking about other things, like also wanting to kill black people and also wanting to kill, brown people and everything else and using a whole bunch of other racial slurs, it changes the way that we would view the few pages that were released. Remember this take I give. Even if you feel like it's wrong, it is right. Even if you fight against it with all your brain, deep down, eventually you're going to give into this position, okay? Selective transparency is worse than no transparency. A small amount of data is worse than no data. Oftentimes this is the case, okay? If I have a 100-page manifesto where every single page is dedicated to hating a different ethnic group and I only show you one page, you're gonna get a completely different impression of what that manifesto is about without seeing any of it, or compared to having seen none of it, So just, be careful about that. Tel Aviv was made next to Jaffa specifically because of the port access and because it was built in a speed run. Jaffa has its own history from Arab conquest and crusaders. Haifa too, no reason to compare. Cool. Okay. Did you see the Hamas fighter's call to his parents was misinterpreted? Sam Harris had a long-time Middle Eastern reporter on, and he said the parents seemed to be in shock and not encouraging. Okay.
At precisely this moment, the new black rulers took over, imitated perfectly the French aristocratic system. They named counts and so on. This violence served the establishment as a pure copy of European feudal aristocracy there. But Haiti nonetheless did something prohibited. And do you know that to be reintegrated into world economy, Haiti...
What do you think about posting bad stories that are balanced and show both sides of the conflict? Like, for example, anti-Semitic Palestinian mob kills 10 Israeli citizens, but those Israeli citizens were... Listen, if somebody's killing 10 plus people, that's fine. I'm just saying that I don't want an accounting of every single story of anti-Arab or anti-Jewish violence that's happening across the world, or anti-Islam or anti-Jewish violence across the world. Because then at that point, it's just a race to post stories on both sides to try to win the propaganda war. I'm not interested in seeing it on my subreddit. It's very boring to me. I just don't care. I don't need to see like every single time. But like if 10 people are being killed in an event, that's a pretty big deal. 10, that's a mass killing. 5 plus is like, that's a big deal. But I don't think there are any stories right now. It seems like when I make an announcement about things in the sub, people like start to upvote and downvote accordingly. So that's good. But I don't say this now. But when I was traveling, I felt like every day it was just swarmed with stories of like Jewish person gets killed, a swastika drawn on their door, Arab Palestinian gets killed by Zionists, blah, blah. Like I feel like I was seeing these posts like every single day, and it was just driving me crazy. Man, something that I thought was so cool. But it didn't end up working. Some fucker emailed me and he said that his dad, or his grandpa or his great grandpa was part of the 1948 War of Independence for Israel. And he asked if I wanted his dad to come on and chat, and that would have actually been fascinating. I would have loved to talk to somebody who'd been, if you have a really old Jewish or Israeli or whatever fucking grandparent, and they fought in that 48 War of Independence, that would be a fascinating conversation to have. But apparently his grandpa said he didn't want to. But his grandpa's also 100 years old, so I don't know. But yeah, if anybody has that family member, I would be so interested to talk to that person. Why not talk to Dan? Good one. You should debate President Sunday on this. He is educated on the topic. Yeah, I'm good on that. Majority reports helping spread unsupported misinformation. Small arms don't do that kind of damage to... Oh, it's the majority report, of course. Okay, we were going to listen to just a little bit more. That's probably not going to listen to all of this. Fuentes is doing a content stream on you. Ask Fuentes to come in and debate you. Oh, I'm going to start to very strictly maintain a blacklist of people. Fuentes is on my blacklist for the foreseeable future. I'm sick and tired of this cringe, like deplatforming shit where they run around and they try to spam report people. I'm gonna post like evidence of why I have people on a blacklist. But when he's like amplifying shit, like literally amplifying fucking communists, like Hassan fans, to try to get me deplatformed, it's just cringe. So Fuentes is a no-go. I'm not doing any shows or anything with him for at least until the end of the year. Right now it's indefinite. Maybe in the future I'll change my mind. But yeah, I'm just not going to engage with people that engage with people that do that sort of behavior. Lonerbox, my good friend.
Dustin.
Okay. Do you feel comfortable having this conversation? This is going to be a doozy.
Yeah, why not?
Okay. I feel like the almost the entirety right now of the current Palestinian refugee crisis, I feel like it is almost entirely manufactured to maintain war with Israel.
They're a little bit different from other refugees, right? Like different rules and shit.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want me to tell you what I know, or do you want to tell me what you know?
We can go either way. I've got two strong arguments in favor of this. You can go first if you want, and then I can come back after, or I can go first if you want, and then you can try to counter that. But yeah, what do you want to do?
So even from the beginning, when 750,000 people were fucked out of Palestine, they weren't really fucked out of Palestine. They were pushed out of what is now Israel. Like, I think 500,000 of them went to Gaza and the West Bank.
Oh, fuck.
And became stateless
you just gave me
there.
You just gave me a third argument, okay? Not helping, but okay. That is true, though.
200, yeah.
Okay.
200,000 of them went to Lebanon, Syria, fucking Egypt, or, Jordan. So, and then I guess after that, a lot of them have remained stateless, either in Gaza or the West Bank, or in Lebanon, where they're basically treated like absolute horseshit. And some places they get citizenship, like Jordan. It's like a second-class citizenship, but like you wouldn't be a refugee in that. You've got passports, so yeah, your issue is like domestic. That's why I think generally proposals that have come after Camp David, like Taba, Geneva, they tend to more or less put a huge compromise on right of return. I think at Taba, one of the proposals was that they wanted Israel to like optically recognize it in principle, to just say we recognize the suffering caused in 48 to Palestinians. And they the exchange was basically going to be like they would try basically everything they could to get them settled somewhere that wasn't Israel. Like that was basically the Taba understanding of right of return, as far as I know, right? Like it was acknowledgement with limits on implementation, acknowledging Israel's demographic concerns. Israel would only be one of several destinations that people who were stateless could go. Other places would be fucking... Canada was actually one that offered at one point. Yeah. So even if you look at the polling, this is 2001. I can't remember recent ones. I think it was only... of all the refugees in Jordan, Lebanon, and the occupied territories, they were polled. Only 10% of them said they'd ever want to go to Israel if they were given the right.
Okay, interesting.
So I don't know if that... yeah, I don't know. When fucking
Okay, I feel like I was asking you for. You were supposed to be giving me arguments on the other side.
Well, that's what. That's the. So what the other side is that if you look at polling, even from more recently, they'll basically tell you that a very surprising number of people in Gaza and the West Bank have said on different times that they'd be willing to basically give up right of return in exchange for a state. So I think the big difference between the Palestinian refugee problem and other ones is that that there's a big portion of those displaced people who have either remained stateless in the occupied territories or they've been fucked over by Arab countries like Syria and fucking Lebanon, right? And I guess the debate is like what to do about it. It's like pressure Lebanon and people like that to give them proper citizenship, or is it pressure Israel to give them reparations to help them get settled somewhere? Maybe even put them let them some of them go to Europe or America. Yeah, I don't know. But
so here's. Or go ahead.
I don't know what you're fighting. I don't know what you're fighting against. That's the thing. Yeah.
Okay, so this is my perspective. Okay, so an argument that's commonly given that I hear. I've heard a lot of people, I don't know if Israelis say this, but I hear a lot of people online say Palestinian refugees are unique to normal refugees because their grandchildren can get refugee status. That's like an argument that I hear put out a lot. But when you go to research actual refugees, I think all refugees have that right, that their children are also considered refugees. So that's actually not a unique part of the Palestinian refugee stuff. But then as I was digging through like the different things of the refugee status, there were like two huge things that I noticed that seem to dramatically overinflate the Palestinian refugee issue in a way that makes it so much worse than it probably should be. Now I have three reasons, which I think is interesting. But the first one is the idea that that you just brought up, that when these people were made refugees, it's interesting that they're not actually asking for a right to resettle overall the land they had. They want to go back to the actual specific territory, like the actual specific neighborhood that they used to live in. I don't know if any other refugee is treated that way. I've never heard that before. That's a question I would have. Is any other refugee given or given the right to resettle into their actual old homes? That's a crazy one, okay? Then there are two other big issues that I have, okay? So the first one that I thought was very interesting was the UN body that took over the Palestinian refugee stuff, the UNRWA. Their mandate as part of this is just to provide services for Palestinians. Part of their mandate, they explicitly are not called upon to ever work to resettle any of them. There's no part of that mandate. So that's one thing that's pretty unique. So it's part of a refugee program with no obligation and no desire. No, it's just not even part of their job is to attempt to resettle any of the Palestinian refugees. So already off to kind of a weird start. Okay, so there's no, it's a refugee program that doesn't try to resettle anybody. It just like provides, I think it was like five vital services, they say, number one. And then the second part is, I believe that it's been decided by, I don't know if it was the Arab League, but basically all Arab states are not to issue passports or citizenship to any Palestinian because they think that it hurts Palestinians' ability to fight against Israel for land claims in the future. So what this means is that you have an actual system of apartheid in basically every single neighboring Arab state where Palestinians are considered quote-unquote refugees, where they live in quote-unquote refugee camps that are just big cities, but basically they're just relegated as second-class citizens in those countries because those countries will never resettle them. They'll never issue passports to them, and sometimes it's hard to even get permits to work and shit. And the only reason they're kept there is so they can continue to multiply and they can bolster like the amount of Palestinian refugees there are to fight against Israel for territory. That second part, I feel like I have to be missing something because it can't be that much of a double standard. That is insane to me. That people in like Lebanon and Syria, because they talk about it, I've heard this a lot, like, oh, we have hundreds of thousands of Palestinian refugees. Yeah, but they're not trying to resettle them. They keep them in camps. They explicitly deny citizenship to any of them. Sometimes they issue work permits. They just keep them there to let them multiply, and maintain the fight. Yeah, talk to me about this.
So I don't know how dominant the reason is that they're doing it because they want to keep the right alive or to keep the Palestinian cause alive. I know for Lebanon specifically, the reason they don't want to give them citizenship is because Lebanon's entire foundation is to have this like three-way demographic split, where Christians get the presidency, Sunnis get the fucking prime minister, and Shias get the speaker of the parliament. And then like any demographic shift that's quite major, for example, like a million Palestinian refugees or whatever, that just like ruins it for them. So like the problem with Lebanon, for one example, is just that they fucking hate Palestinians over there.
Sure, I'm sure they do, but then
shifts. Yeah.
It's interesting to me. There's two things. One then is that all of these Arab states, when they say they take in refugees, that's kind of bullshit because they don't actually try to resettle any of them. They just keep them on their borders and they never make any attempt whatsoever to integrate these people anywhere. They literally keep
they don't.
Yeah.
And there's also this very, I don't know how much it still exists, but there's this very like toxic culture within Palestinian communities a lot with like mostly I think to do with the leaders where they will they'll get accused of like normalization, and that's like the worst. You can't do normalization if you try like for people in Lebanon who so much as try to like someone who marries a Lebanese person to get citizenship, right? Or they try to just make like a better situation out of their refugee camp, then that's like there's a huge stigma about doing that.
So I think you mentioned Jordan, but I'm pretty sure, because I was trying to do reading on this. I think at one point in time, it might have been after 1967, that all of the Palestinians prior to that got Jordanian citizenship. I don't think it's that way anymore, though. I think if you're Palestinian, you might automatically have access to like a Jordanian temporary passport or something, but you got to pay huge fees for it, and there's a lot of restrictions, and I don't think you ever get Jordanian citizenship. Somebody can correct me on that if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that changed post 1967. You don't just get Jordanian citizenship anymore if you're a Palestinian. I think, and I wish I could find where this decree started, but I thought that this was decreed in the Arab League, that they literally said, that was the stated reason. We're not giving any of these Palestinian refugees citizenship because we don't want to weaken their claim for the territories that Israel has occupied. I don't know if somebody can find me the origination of this protocol or whatever, because I'd be interested if I could find that, but yeah.
Yeah, I've heard them. I tend to hear the Jordanian ones just recognized as second-class citizens, or described it that way. That's what I heard them described as, second-class citizens.
Yeah. But then the other thing too, then, which is a little bit surprising, and I don't want to like just meme back on the memers, but something that's a little bit crazy about this then is that would mean that legitimately in all of these countries, Palestinians are living under actual apartheid, right? They're actually treated as second-class citizens. They're actually not given the same rights as the people there. They could have been living there their whole lives. Their parents could have been living there their whole lives, but it's like an explicit stated policy to never let these people become citizens. They just maintain an indefinite presence in your borders.
Legally, it's not actual apartheid because the whole intent behind the crime of apartheid, I'm pretty sure, is to institutionalize a regime of domination by one group over another, which is why like there's not like a nation state law or any of that shit that's keeping them refugees, right? It's like, so it's not really, it's not actual apartheid. It's
well, can you tell me what's the difference between
different reasons?
Because isn't their apartheid going to essentially continue until Israel's apartheid ends? Like, isn't that essentially? So how can we argue? Because aren't they basically keeping them there indefinitely as second-class citizens until Israel no longer does so?
You can say the conditions are tantamount. Of course they are, yeah. But it's not like it's done with the intent. It's not like Lebanese people keep Palestinians as refugees without giving them citizenship because they want to impose a system of like Lebanese domination over the region, right? It's not why they do it. So it's just the intent's just a little bit different, yeah. So. Yeah, okay. I don't like the whole like this is actual apartheid, whereas I don't like that argument. But I mean, I've even had this from like I've gained a few Palestinian like followers in my community as well. Like, yeah, this is like it's not a very uncommon sentiment for Palestinians to kind of recognize that they have no friends. They don't like the Arab states are like they see the Arab states often like just as horrible to them as Israel is. So And I feel like that's just been the situation always. But I guess did you maybe get the same conclusion from all the history stuff? Is that they're just kind of used as a fucking by other Arab leaders? They're often used as a kind of like a PR kind of like chip for like for Syria, for example, where they would always have this like we are the liberators of the Palestinians, and that would be like their international identity, but then that was often just a really good way to distract from all the crazy domestic issues that they had in the 60s and 70s. Yeah.
Maybe, yeah. But I guess I came up against, I don't remember what it was. I was reading something, and then something had mentioned, like, since like the Arab states had decided not to give passports to Palestinians, and then I thought that was interesting. And then I started reading about the UN RWA, and on their FAQ part of their page, they have a thing like, why don't you guys resettle refugees? And then their answer is like, well, we don't have a mandate to. It's not part of our job. And then those two things combined, now you say there's like 5 million plus Palestinian refugees. That seems really strange to me, that you're going to have refugees living essentially forever in all of these surrounding Arab states, and they never have a path to citizenship because they're explicitly kept there as just refugees with there's no body internationally that's trying to help these people get resettled, because the UN's mandate over them doesn't include resettling, which is incredibly weird to me. Yeah.
I mean, I've heard some people say that they, like, especially more pro-Israel types, that they have very suspicious like views of the UN with the way that they treat the whole issue. But I think that's why I always try to emphasize the difference between Arab leaders, then Palestinian leaders, and just Palestinian people themselves, because because I feel like the former two just like will have more often than not just fucked over the latter for their own benefits, you know.
Well, damn,
it's pretty sad, isn't it?
Well, you didn't help me there at all. Anything else?
I don't know what you were wanting, like the fucking pan-Arab idea that like all the states come together and just keep Palestinians suffering so that they can eventually use them to destroy Israel, or I don't know.
Yeah. Well, it makes me look at that one number, because Palestinian refugees are oftentimes presented in such a sad light internationally. It's done. I've only seen it done to attack Israel, but I've never seen any of these surrounding countries talked about. And anytime I brought this up with another Muslim, I would guess, or Middle Eastern, or even I think Q might have even used this argument, their response is always, well, hold on, actually, we've got hundreds of thousands of refugees. You're just wrong. And then when I go and Google refugees in surrounding Arab states, I'm like, oh, you're right, you do. So I guess I can't criticize you guys. But I was unaware of this. Yeah, so this is what it was. It was the Arab League's Resolution 1547. Exhorts Arab states to support Palestinians' nationality by not granting them citizenship. Palestine's granting a Palestinian citizenship would actually be consistent with this resolution because it would strengthen and formalize Palestinian nationality. But it was this Arab League resolution that basically made them unite in not giving nationality to any Palestinian, which is, that's wild to me. But
I thought that was a fairly commonly known thing, because I've had those discussions with Israelis all the time as well. I think for me, when people talk about right of return, and this is what usually comes up in negotiation talks in the past, or from like more reasonable like pro-Palestinian side, is that it's like I think a lot of people mostly just want Israel to recognize the right of return and like acknowledge their role in the beginning of the crisis, and then to be involved in reparations and like that kind of thing.
Sure.
There are obviously like the hardliners who do think that whole thing of how they basically mapped out like every fucking village down to the exact coordinates, and they should go exactly to this place, and it's like,
I will say,
oh god, the fucking propaganda campaign is like, it's like, oh, you think Palestinians shouldn't be allowed to have their homes back? It's like, mate, what fucking homes? The homes were destroyed. You know, just drop them in this random plot of land next to a slab of concrete that's left over.
One thing that I think is like really kind of sad or insane. I just dropped something, and I just figured out what I was saying. One thing that I thought was like fucking insane was as assuming that what came out of it is true and that it's not being made up by the US and the Israeli side. The idea that those Camp David Accords had allotted for I think it was 100,000 Palestinians to move back into Israel, and that like a $30 billion international fund would be created to help resettle the other Palestinian refugees. That seemed like an unbelievably generous offer in terms of like what could have been for figuring that stuff out, for that to get shot down. Oof, everything that's leaked out of Camp David, the more or less the contiguous land that the Palestinians would have had. I don't know if you've seen any of the post Camp David maps. It seems so sad that all got shelved and fucked basically.
The post camp, because the idea that it was like non-contiguous, but there was still like a bridge or something. What are you talking about?
Well, did you see the Trump plan for peace for the Arab states?
Yeah, they're fucking, yeah.
It's insane. The Camp David one seemed way more. So if I look for Camp David Accord maps, two-state, let's see, map. Now, I don't believe to be fair, I don't think official maps were produced from this. These were maps that people made after the talks where they had felt like these were what the proposals were going to look like. So here's Lonerbox. Boom. Here are like some of the maps for what it had looked like. The American offer is insane. What is this bullshit? For what the American map looked like it could have been, that's wild. This would have been like an insanely crazy offer. When I say crazy, I'm sorry. I don't mean good or bad. I just meant that would have been. It would have been. It's a lot for what the Palestinians could have gotten. The Palestinian view was pretty good. Even the Israeli offer for like a final map, and I don't know if the Palestinians could have come back and negotiated more. Even this particular map, there's still a couple of these stupid fucking enclaves set up, which is annoying. Yeah. But like it's probably so much more contiguous than anything else. And then with the highway built between Gaza and the West Bank.
Well.
Go ahead.
I think this is like the 91%, right, of the West Bank. This is what they.
It might have been. There were a whole bunch between 91 to 95 with like 2 to 3% land swaps that were offered as well. There was a whole bunch of back and forth on that. Yeah.
The problem with this was that that Palestinian view of the proposal, which is that like those two kind of like cleavages, I guess, between the Jerusalem corridor to the Jerusalem to the Jordan River, and then the one up there, which is the Ariel settlement. I think that one of the problems with Camp David, as well as the fact that it was pulled together quite quickly, and it kind of like lumped the third part of the Oslo Accords in with it as well. I think that was like a big problem from the beginning. But I think even in Camp David for a while, Israel and Palestinians were using different definitions of the West Bank's land. So 91% for Israel was also, for Palestinians, was actually 86%, because they both had different definitions of where the West Bank borders actually were. So there was like a kind of like... there was the whole area around East Jerusalem, which they had like a dispute over what counted as the West Bank and what didn't, or like the waters near the Dead Sea. So, but also the fact that, that Israeli thing where they wanted to have military presence in the Jordan Valley for like between 6 and 21 years. And the fear that big split there on the middle between Jerusalem and the Jordan River. Yeah. In the Palestinian view. A big fear about that was that a road, that would just be like mostly just a road. But what tended to happen under Oslo was that you had these roads that separated areas C from A and B. And those roads would often become a prerequisite for more installations around them, like security things or checkpoints or like more intrusions added on. Yeah. That's why I think, because even at Taba, the land offer went up to 94, 95. So, I don't know. I think I've been reading a bit more about that. I'm starting to see a bit more why Palestinians, I think, were maybe slightly more justified in walking away from that one. But
I mean, I feel like at this point, though, I feel like Israel has a right to advocate pretty strongly for the military defense thing. Although, like, in my mind, this is like the idealistic view. In my mind, the idealistic view is like you sign on to something like this. If the Palestinian state became like a thriving, like highly prosperous economic place with a lot of education and technological jobs and all this, I feel like at some point you're in a pretty strong position to start rolling some of that back, right? Like, I feel like the wall came down between East and West Germany, right? We should be able to roll some of that back eventually. But I feel like Israel's pretty justified in security concerns, until you're leading up to that point. But I mean, that's taking a bit more of the... Yeah, go ahead.
For some reason, I felt like the Taba security measures were less extreme than the Camp David ones. But
well, Taba was after Camp David, right?
Yeah.
I think at the end, by the Taba ones, I think the only thing they requested was Palestinians couldn't have a formal army, like they could have like local security, like police, but no like heavy like armor, no machinery or whatever like that, artillery. They couldn't have an air force, and that Israel wanted to install, I think they were arguing for 3 radar installations across the West Bank for monitoring. I think those are the 3 things that they had fought for, but yeah.
Yeah, so... I don't know. I feel like Taba and Geneva just seemed like they just seemed to have a lot more promise to them than because the whole build up to Camp David was very like scuffled.
Yeah, for sure.
Like the fact that there was the third whatever you call it, the third withdrawal or the third redeployment just didn't happen. It was just kept as a bargaining chip by Barak. Yeah, I don't know.
Wait, what was the third redeployment? What is this referring to?
So the Oslo Accords had 3 stages of redeployment.
Where you were slowly handing over shit to the Palestinian Authority. Okay, and then that part hadn't happened yet because everybody,
because Y River bundled up the second redeployment into 2 redeployments, and then you've got so then Barak held off on the third redeployment that was present in Oslo, and I think he had 2 reasons. I think one was to use as a bargaining chip, and I think they also argued that Palestinians hadn't upheld their end of disarming militant groups.
Sure.
So, but then that's also because both sides. Yeah, I've been reading a lot about this one. Like both sides were, since the '96 tunnel riots, where both sides had basically ended up preparing for militant responses to one another.
Yeah.
Constantly throughout the 90s. It was like this kind of fucking armed race because Israelis thought that they'd been being too soft on Palestinian protesters. Palestinians thought that they were going to have to assert some force to push more serious negotiations when it came to concessions from Israel. And the youth wing was split up with the old guard of Fatah. So yeah, I don't know. Yeah. But that's a separate discussion. I don't know.
Yeah. Well. Yeah, okay. Well, anything else?
I'm
probably going to watch you and Hassan going back and forth. I think that'd be interesting, see what you guys are arguing about.
Yeah. I've made a new friend. What can I say?
I say that, yeah.
I am very appreciative of the fact that he completely ignored everyone in his chat trying to spread rumors about me and shit. That was nice.
Yeah? Did he, wait, was that a good thing or a bad thing? I can't tell. Were you being sarcastic?
No, that was a good thing, yeah. As in, like, probably because the rumors are just so insane, right? Sure. I don't know if you know, like, how wacky people have gotten about me over
I've seen, I think Bad Empanada's been behind a few of those, yeah. I saw the really funny one about, my dad was a grandfather in, he was, a phalangist? Yeah, in southern Lebanon, fighting in, Sabra, what are the 2 places with that big...
Sabra and Shatila, yeah.
Yeah, which if you weren't watching, that's basically the equivalent of saying like, my grandfather, fought really hard in the concentration camps. He was like a guard in a watchtower. It's basically like the equivalent of that to say that. Yeah, but I didn't know if you were saying that like it's a good thing that Hassan didn't amplify those rumors, or if it was a bad thing and you were being sarcastic because he didn't actually address any of them being spread in chat. But
no. He said like it's because we spoke in DMs. He just said no, you're just saying that because he's Lebanese. And I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what. Yeah, it's like racism. It's like left wing racism.
No way. What? My fellow Gusana. Gusano, yeah.
I know, right? It's a shared experience. It's a very rare shared experience.
Oh.
An IRI with the fucking IDF family.
True.
Bro, I don't know what. I'm still going through like just like a little refresher on all the history and shit. Have you come to any new conclusions since reading all that stuff?
Nope, not yet. I don't think so. My strongest criticism for Israel is still the West Bank stuff. I think it should all be literally nuclear exploded. All the settlement camps, but other than that, I don't feel like I've changed my mind on anything else. Everything just seems to be getting more crystallized.
What do you, in terms of, because I know you like to talk about your self-defense stuff. The outposts, right? The caravans that the crazy religious people set up in the West Bank.
I don't know anything about this, but just from the little you've told me, I'm guessing it's like settlers setting up what they call security-related outposts that are probably just used to harass and kill Palestinians.
No, it's not. It's nothing to do with security. This is like unofficial. This like Israel considers this illegal.
Oh, okay.
These are the crazy f***ers who go there with these like little. I don't remember what they're called, but they're like these. Yeah, basically like caravans or tents.
Oh, they're like in the United States. What do we call these guys? There were cringe fucking LARPers in the US, conservatives, that would go down to the border and they would play like border security agent.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jesus. But okay, I understand. Gotcha.
Yeah. So as far as those things go, I think it's perfectly justified if those guys are like out for a little walk in the valley, that their little outpost caravan just gets like blown up by some crazy Zoomer ski mask paraglider person.
Yeah, without sounding too unhinged, and also on YouTube, so I'm trying to be a little bit careful, but like, except for maybe like people that are under the age of 18 that couldn't choose otherwise. But yeah, I feel like for all the things that like dipshit lefties say about like Zionist imperialists and the settlers and blah, 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 like all of those arguments I think apply to people over the age of 17 in the West Bank. Like 100%. I have no sympathy for any of those people ever. But yeah.
What do you think about, was it you and Katie who were arguing about what constitutes about how much Israel is like a settler colonial project or a expansionist project, any of that stuff?
A little bit, but Katie didn't know much of the history, so it was kind of hard to have that discussion.
I feel like the rule I've come up with, I think this is probably quite consistent, is that they kind of are like a settler colonial project. Like but the problem is that the Israeli side, they'll just say, oh, we just keep getting attacked by Arabs. But I think those two kind of play into each other, right? Like
a little bit.
Arab countries attack Israel or threaten them, and then that always gives Israel like an excuse to push a little bit further. I don't know if you know the whole process about the annexation of East Jerusalem after 67.
What about it?
About how, so the Six-Day War starts in like, it's just like a perfect example of Israel just using the aggression or the threats posed by their enemies to take more shit, basically.
A little bit, although I will say, just to start this conversation off, because I always say there's always like, it always seems like you got it, not you, like there's a good argument here, but then there's like something preceding, it's like, Israel did explicitly tell Jordan, hey, please don't attack us and we won't attack you. Don't fucking do it. And I think the quote coming back from, I think it was Hussein at the time, King Hussein, was the die has already been cast. And then they started just attacking into West Jerusalem. And then that's when Israel did the counter push and then took the West Bank from Jordan, basically. Yeah. But yeah, go ahead. Yeah. But I know they expanded their territory, obviously. Yeah. I mean, that's when they got the West Bank, was off the back of that attack. Yeah.
Yeah. So them like going in there because they've just been attacked from there. I don't have a problem with, like, that makes sense. But the thing is that like, it's how much they, like exactly what you just said is the fact that Israel is just so willing to use that to just take what they kind of wanted anyway. So like the 6-Day War started on what, June 5th?
Yes, June 5th to June 11th, yeah.
Do you know when the first government meeting was where they brought up the prospect of annexing East Jerusalem?
If I had to guess, 5th. Was it the 5th?
Yeah. So the day the war starts, they're like,
I will say,
let's annex East Jerusalem.
Yeah, I will say, though, that something that I would have to see the minutes to these conversations. Something that's really important is there's a lot of contingencies and there's a lot of things that are talked about that aren't necessarily plans, but then could become those plans or could not be. And this is a really hard thing to sort out sometimes. So for instance, we've talked about this back and forth a lot. I think the very first time Plan Dalit was like kind of more formalized, I think was in 46. But the argument is just that like, well, there were 3 other plans prior to this. They didn't necessarily want to go through with this, but they did in response to like the conflict, you know? So yeah, I'm curious. I would have to see the specific conversations, or if there's like a book of somebody recounting those conversations during that 6-day war. Yeah, I'm curious.
I could give you I'll send you a link of a paper that I read because it's very much it's like a legal paper almost. Just but it's very much taken from all the government meetings. But it's like basically like the TLDR is that they knew that if they were taking the West Bank after that war, that the international community would not want them annexing East Jerusalem. They would probably want to make it an international zone. That's probably the most likely thing.
Sure.
And they were already in the middle of the war discussing how they would go about annexing it before the international community had a chance to push back on them, even the United States.
Sure.
So they I think there's one meeting where they even reassure the American ambassador that they're like, no, we'd never do that. That's like colonial and shit. I think there's like a really, something about they're not looking for territorial aggrandizement and no colonial aspirations. That was what Eban said to the U.S. ambassador. So the way that they went about it was that they kept it very, very low key. They kept it out of the press in Israel, which actually led to a big rift between editors and like, free press arguments. And when they took so the plan was to just take it to the Knesset as quickly as possible. So they take it to the Knesset, and then on the day of the vote, before the international community even has a chance to start like having a session on it, they went around making sure that everyone kept this Knesset vote as low key as possible. So they go around, they tell everyone that like this needs to be subtle, okay? And they had to like specifically tell people to not sing the national anthem in the middle of the session because the national anthem has the word Zion in it, which means Jerusalem. So yeah. And some people got a bit soy anyway, but by then it was too late. The Knesset vote was the debate and vote was 3 hours to decide to annex East Jerusalem, and that was it.
I feel like this would have been like a really great scenario, or I wish it could have happened, where Israel makes these meetings, they tell Jordan not to attack, and then Jordan doesn't, and then like Israel invades anyway to conquer the territory. Like that would have been, then I can like point to that and go like, oh, look, these Jews, they were going to do it. Look at them. They conquered this shit, even though nobody was like threatening them from that. Like, I feel like that would have been a strong argument. But like every single time, and I would have to be dishonest to say it doesn't look like there was ever a part of Israeli history where they talk about like conquering their territory, because this is pervasive in like all of their talks, right, where they're discussing surrounding territory, right? So obviously those aims seem to be there, or at least they're there in conversations, whether or not they materialize. But then like every single time I'm like, okay, Israel's about to fuck up. It feels like everybody around them basically like, it's like Israel like walks into a bar and like, give me a fucking reason. And then somebody does. And it's like, well, fuck.
Yeah. But yeah, that's kind of how I see it. I guess it's because like because it's even if you view them as like a settler colonial like project or whatever, well, it's about as much of it as you can get away with in the modern world whilst keeping friends, right? Because if you do it Russia style, then you're going to lose everyone. But yeah, with Israel, it's like it's just, I guess they got maybe not fortunate, but it helps that the aggression of the Middle East gives them that excuse. Yeah. Anyway, I just found that. Yeah.
Okay. Well.
But I'll leave you to it, okay?
Yeah, I love you. Be careful.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay, well. Did you see the Rashida Tlaib shit? Was it a good idea for those Dems to cross lines to censure her? Is it censure or censor? I feel like I saw the comments that she made, and I felt like the comments were, I don't want to say unhinged, but they were like kind of bad. I would say her comments were kind of bad. But was it worth censorship in the Congress? My understanding is that's pretty rare, although there's been an uptick of it recently. So I don't know if it was worth censoring her over it. The 234-188 tally came after enough Democrats trying Republicans to censor her. I'm trying to think of what were her original statements. Fuck, I have to go back and find them. But I was like, I could see how somebody... Oh, because I think she used that from the river to the sea shit. She might have said no peace on stolen land. I don't remember if she said that quote. Somebody in chat said that. I didn't remember reading that one, but I know she did that from the river to the sea shit. So... Jeez, what is this? Apparently this was somebody spamming in Hassan's chat. Your completely admirable charitability is wasted on Lonerbox. Hassan, can we agree this video gives absolutely the wrong idea if it's watched by people who don't have your level of contextual knowledge? Wow. Really, it's making it seem like Israel's blameless. I don't think Lonerbox's videos errors are simply because he was trying to keep it short. And separately, I think it shouldn't be kept short either. If he's going to get into the history, get into it. Let Kaya do crimes. Does that mean Cheney wanted it? Your completely admirable charitability is wasted on Lonerbox. Your completely admirable charitability is wasted on Lonerbox. Your completely admirable charitability is wasted on Lonerbox. Jesus Christ. I know how you feel about charitability, and I admire it deeply, but Lonerbox is one of those people who will take a long time for one to realize you have to not be so charitable. He plays a very subtle game.